I'm so excited this summer to offer two workshops at this year's Sidwell Summer through their Summer Equity and Justice Institute. To best serve the students who are going to attend those two workshops, I carefully selected a group of incredible student leaders who are change makers themselves. Fenley Scurlock is one of the student leaders that I have selected. I was super excited when I reached out to him, sent out my invitation, and he said yes to join my invitation to join me this summer to serve those high school students. Super honored. Finley is a senior at Stanford Online High School and an incoming freshman at Brown University. He's also an author, a 2026 Coca-Cola Scholars semi-finalist, a recipient of the 2024 Davidson Ambassador for Social Entrepreneurship, and the Congressional Award Gold Medal recipient, and so many more. So today's interview with Finley will just be a highlight of his journey to becoming such an incredible student leader. I invite you to register for my two summer workshops at Sidwell this summer so that your kid can talk to Finley directly and learn from such an incredible youth role model. So, hey, Finley, thank you so much for joining me on this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, exactly. So I know my very short introduction is such a disservice to everything you have accomplished. When I was reading your bio, I was like, wow, I feel like you did more than me. And I'm so much older than you. But anyway, so please add more to my very short introduction about you.
Sure. So I first started I first started writing and got into entrepreneurship as well when I was 7 years old. I started a small business selling soaps that I made at local farmers markets and business fairs, and it sparked an interest in entrepreneurship that then, when I was 12, served as a foundation for Down to Business, a book that I wrote alongside my co-author Jason Liao for our our book for release in 2024 with Penguin Random House. So for our book, we interviewed 51 entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs from all different industries around the world about their advice for our generation in terms of how we can learn more about entrepreneurship, how we can develop as leaders, what generally advice they had for our generation, and how we can use social entrepreneurship and other aspects of an entrepreneurial mindset to make a difference in the world and tackle some of the problems that we are facing. So, through Down to Business and all of the surrounding events and efforts that we've done to help students learn about entrepreneurship and develop their leadership skills, we are essentially trying to provide a resource that we never had starting out
Mm.
about how you can get started in entrepreneurship, how you can learn about the things that you're passionate about and take it and make something with it that will hopefully change the world.
I love it. There's so much to unpack, and we're definitely going to unpack your story and your journey. So you mentioned that you started this whole journey when you were really, really young. So share with us, did something happen that sparked your interest in becoming an entrepreneur at a very young age?
So I've always been a very creative person. From 2 years old, I was pacing in the living room telling stories to my parents. Um, from a little older than that, I was already doing all sorts of wild artistic projects. One of those was, as I mentioned, I was creating these soaps. Well, it turned out one day that the a local farmers market in my area in Olney, Maryland, had a children's entrepreneur day where you could come in
Oh,
and
wow.
sell things, figure out what it's like to run a little stand and sell products. So I was like, well, what if I brought my soaps, brought some of the other things that I've created here and tried to sell them? That it was just sort of a decision I made on a whim at the time, but it really um, it set the foundation for everything because I really loved the experience and I really learned a lot from it that not only how to create a product, how to price it, how to package it, and so forth, but
Mm.
how to talk to customers, how to
Yeah.
figure out what they want, and create something that will make people happy. And that led me to find many other opportunities from what little there were. There was a um, children's fair in DC called the Acton Children's Business Fair that was a huge part of my early experiences. Um, it has since gone worldwide. You can now find them everywhere, and that those experiences were all things where I was learning these skills that I found very interesting and getting a chance to put some of the things I was passionate about into something that would affect other people, into something that I could offer other people. And I really loved the experience. And I also noticed that it wasn't something that I was being taught anywhere else. These were
Mm,
ideas that I'd never really been exposed to before. And that was really the key insight that set the foundation for Down to Business. Because while there were resources available, I don't know that I would have gotten started if there weren't. They were all things that I had to search for and
mm,
found outside of my normal everyday life as a student. And I thought that that was a problem because I was really growing so much from the experiences I was
yeah.
having, and I didn't see so many of my peers having anything like those experiences. And oftentimes I felt like there weren't as many resources available or as much advice available as I would have liked. And generally, I just wish that there was more out there
Yeah.
and someone who could provide a guide map and say, how is this supposed to work? Here, like this is an option you have. Here's how you can go pursue it. And that was what I wanted to give to my peers with Down to Business.
Um, so you became the solution that you wish you had at a very young age. I love that. So from selling soaps at a very young age to what you and your co-author, what you guys did, publish a book, that is definitely not a small task as a high schooler. So share with us, how did that book idea come about?
So, Jason is one of my close friends, and we would always bounce ideas off of each other and just like talk with each other and as we were hanging out on any given day. And he had similar experiences in entrepreneurship. He worked on designing websites for local companies, and so we both had a background in entrepreneurship, and we were talking about how we weren't really given
Mm,
much of a guide map, as I had said. And we thought, well, what if we talked to some people who had already made it and tried to get some
mm,
guidance? And At first, that was really our primary goal. We just wanted to learn from people who had more
mm,
experience than us and enter a sort of intergenerational conversation. And and that was where the idea first started. And then a little while down the line, we were like, well, others kids might be interested in this too. And we did a little bit of research and we found out that it turns out roughly 50% of Gen Z wants to be their own boss when they grow up, and upwards of 75% of Gen Alpha. So we weren't alone. And that
mm,
that was a revelation. And that was I think that discovery that really brought us onto the path to Down to Business, because we realized that this was something that other people were missing too, and that if we could gather advice from people who knew about entrepreneurship, who could tell us what we should be doing, then that
mm,
could be a resource not only for us to develop our skills further, but for all of our peers. And so that was when we first started reaching out to local business leaders. It was mostly at the start friends of friends, smaller businesses in the area, and that experience gave us the confidence to go further, because we, after the first few, started cold calling, cold emailing all of these entrepreneurs, researching businesses that we were passionate about and or just found cool, or that we thought were making a difference in the world in some way, and reached out to them and asked, hey, do you have a few minutes to chat with us?
mm.
And that it was it was a really nerve-wracking experience at first, but that was sort of how it all got started. And the more people we spoke with, the more we were determined to see it through because we'd already gotten so much advice, we'd learned so much, and we wanted to put that into something that we could share with others.
I love it. And like everything you shared reminded me so much of my own experience when I just started out as an entrepreneur, when I was cold emailing people, that feeling. So I want to unpack this a little bit because I know so many young people, especially now we spend so much time online. So many young people I have observed, they really have this fear when they are talking to people they have never met before. And so what you just described is definitely not common. So I'm curious, how did you overcome that initial fear? Oh my gosh, there's a CEO. I'm a middle schooler. I'm a high schooler. They don't know me. I don't know them. I'm kind of below them. So how did you share with me your internal conversation and how did you overcome that fear or you acted with the fear? So I'm just curious and to share that with us.
So I would say there are probably two main factors here. The first one is simply that we were scared at first. And one of the things that one of the entrepreneurs we spoke with said that's really stuck with us as a quote and has sort of been something we've modeled this whole experience off of is feel the fear and do it
Oh,
anyways.
I
And
love
I
it.
love that quote so much because it really encapsulates a lot of what we were doing, what the other entrepreneurs we spoke with were doing, and really what an entrepreneurial mindset is all about. Because it really isn't about whether it's scary, it's whether you can keep going in spite of it being scary. And I think that
Mm,
that is a step that is difficult to take, but once you take it once, it gets easier and easier to take it and make it a part of how you act in any situation. And I think that can really take you from um, from that first nerve-wracking moment through to the finish line. And then the second factor I would say is just that we we really try to remember that we weren't asking something wrong, that it was
mm,
good to be curious, and that
mm,
oftentimes these entrepreneurs were very happy to share their insights. And they we got plenty of rejections, of course, and that was something that we slowly figured out how to accept and move past. And it was a big part of the process. But I think that every time that someone responded enthusiastically, and oftentimes they did, that was a reassurance that we were doing this right, that this we were onto something, and that
mm.
when um when we reached out to the next person and they said no, it wasn't something that was wrong with us for asking. It was just the way that these things sometimes play out. And that, so I would say that um, the getting over the initial hurdle uh, was a lot of nerves that we had to overcome. But the more, um, the more experience we got and the more we pushed through those early periods, the easier it was and the more confidence we had, especially because with each interview we were getting more and more experience with the process, refining our
Mm.
questions and so forth. And so it changed slowly, but it changed from something that was very scary initially to something that we look forward to.
I love that. And thank you for demystifying fear because so many young people, they feel like, oh, Finley, he's just courageous. He doesn't have fear. But thank you for sharing, especially in the early days, you really learn how to act with the fear. So that is very encouraging to hear. So thank you for being vulnerable and for sharing that. And as you mentioned, there were lots of rejections, which is understandable. So how did you overcome that feeling? Like I'm sure you are a very high achieving kid. I'm sure you are used to hearing yeses from people. So now you are learning to handle rejection. How did you learn that?
I think that part of it is just that we were told and discovered that it was part of the process. And so
Mm,
we were able to sort of think about it as the prelude to success rather than
Mm.
as the final thing. And that was that was something that we actually heard from a lot of the entrepreneurs, that it started with failure for all of them, for these very, very successful people, that we would hear stories that were exactly like ours in the when they were starting out. There were things like one of the entrepreneurs we spoke with, who's now the founder of a very successful startup, said that it took them, they had 86 no's from venture
Oh, wow.
capitalists before they got their first yes. And those kinds of stories, I think, reassured us that it wasn't bad to fail,
I
because
love
it
that.
was just a part of the process, and it was feedback that you could take and do something with for the next time around. And that shift in mindset was something that isn't always natural or easy.
Mm.
You have to sort of think about it and force yourself to do it just a little bit, but it becomes more normal, I think, as time goes on, to just move past the failure and treat it as a learning moment rather than as a something to be upset about.
I
Um,
love that. Sorry, did I interrupt you? Go ahead.
uh, it's fine. The other thing I was going to say was just that I feel like that is also one of the things that's really powerful about entrepreneurship, is that it allows and makes room for failure,
Mm.
because it's one of the things that I've found in our current education system is that there isn't there isn't a lot of room for failure, and it isn't viewed necessarily as a part of the learning process. And so there isn't always room for that, the ability to know that you won't get it on your first try, that that's all right, and to see what you can do with that and how that can help you do it better the next time. And I feel like that is one of the things that gives entrepreneurship a lot of potential and use for young people, is that
Love that.
it's sort of sandbox where you're allowed to fail.
Mm.
And oftentimes it feels like part of the reason that it feels like failure is the end of the world is because in some regards it is, because we've set up a system where so many factors of your future life are dependent on what scores you get on tests,
Mm.
what grades you get, that those things aren't even things you need to care about personally. You're sort of forced to care about them because society places importance on them. And I think when it comes to entrepreneurship, that culture isn't necessarily there. If anything, I would say that there's a sort of mutual respect for failure, because everyone involved went through the exact same thing.
Mm.
And that really provides an opportunity to learn how what failure is, what you can learn from it, and how it can be something that moves you forward rather than backward.
I love that. And that's why, like in my workshops, I have a whole session to really discuss this because you don't hear this conversation a lot in the traditional classroom. But seems like also your mission, but also my mission to normalize the role of challenge, setbacks, failures in life, and even definitely in entrepreneurship. Actually, there's one of my favorite books on this topic talks about, do you know our brain actually grows the most when we are struggling? Like, like it's just incredible. The book is written by a mathematics professor at Stanford. So in the book, she made arguments and based on solid research that, hey, listen, and you saw the picture, the human brain actually grows the most when we are struggling, failing, trying to figure things out. So thank you for backing that up. I really appreciate it. And there's definitely no overnight success, right? So it is a long journey. So I know in the book you have stories of 51 CEOs and industry leaders, but you guys actually talked more than 51. So I'm curious, out of so many powerful conversations, what is one of the most important things that you learned from those conversations that a typical classroom doesn't actually teach us?
Oh, there are so many.
So
I would say that it's um, a few that come to mind is
hey, listen, pause. Choose, share one or two, and let's save some for the summer camp, for the summer
all
workshop.
right.
Yes, I love
I
that.
assure you I will not run out, but a few to start with. I one of them is, as I said earlier, do the feel the fear and do it anyways. That I
Mm,
think that that is very powerful quote that's really stuck with us as we continue throughout the process, and one that we really held on to because it said that it wasn't that you didn't have to stop just because things were scary, or really that you could interrogate that fear, ask yourself why you were feeling it, accept that rather than being upset at yourself for it, and
mm,
then um, use that as just something to keep in mind as you go forward, something to learn from, but not something to let stop you. And that is much easier said than done, but it's also something that I don't think is said enough. Um, Another thing is simply that it is a slow process, as you were
mm,
just saying, that there are no overnight successes. And I think that that is something that isn't talked about enough. That so many of the people we we spoke with, some of them were called overnight successes. In reality, what looked like an overnight success was the product of years of work to
mm,
prepare for that one night. And really, there isn't such a thing. That it always involves struggle, involves luck,
mm,
involves failure. It is not something that you can just wake up and say, I'm going to start a business today. And I think that that can make it feel overwhelming in certain regards, but I think that the way that we looked at it and the way that we feel like others should as well is as something almost liberatory, that it means that you don't have to do it all in a day. It means that it's all right if you didn't manage something, if you failed, because you have time. And really
mm,
what it's about is showing up each day and doing
mm,
something. It's about stepping outside of your comfort zone. It's about really just trying something new, seeing what you can learn from it, seeing where you can take it, talking to people, asking people questions, and just I suppose a sort of insatiable curiosity that was
mm,
something that we kept close to us as we wrote down to business. And it's also something that I think you need to have, not just to be a successful entrepreneur or leader, but just if you want to succeed in life, period. And that that is something that I think that people people don't really often say when it comes to big projects, but they I almost would say that there aren't big projects. There are just
mm,
projects that involve a lot of small
mm,
steps. And that was really what it was for us, that it was one interview at a time. It
mm.
was one rejection from an agent behind at a time until we finally got behind that and got the one that you needed. It was one rejection from a publisher at a time until we got that perfect yes. And those processes, it took place over the course of 4 years, and
Mm,
that is all right. That some days we didn't do anything, some days we were just focused on school, and that is a normal thing to
mm,
feel. And I feel like there can be a level of guilt if you aren't doing more and more and more.
mm,
And something that we really focused on was the it's not about quantity, it's about consistency. It's about keeping
wow.
showing up. And that was what we tried to do, and we got there.
I love that. One of my favorite sayings that I share with my students all the time is consistency over intensity. So I love that. Yeah. And so you are a social entrepreneur and you care so much about social issues. And I know that you donated so many copies of your book. And so I'm curious, what do you think is the connection between entrepreneurship and ethical leadership?
So I would say that it's in some regards a non-obvious one, because it in today's day and age, we see a lot of corporations that aren't tied to ethical leadership. We see a lot of negative examples, and I think that also there's um we think of entrepreneurship in certain regards as something less broad than it really is.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is mostly when people talk about entrepreneurship, they talk about um, the maverick CEO who started their business in their basement and brought it to $1 billion empire and over the course of a decade and are now famous. And I don't think that that's really what we think. At the beginning it was, but it's something that we
Mm,
learned as we wrote down the business that is not really what entrepreneurship is about. It is more we talk a lot about an entrepreneurial mindset, and that's because it's
mm,
more about it really is a mindset where as some of the different things that I've talked about overcoming failure, um about feeling the fear and doing it anyways,
mhm,
about consistency, all of those things are first and foremost what I think about when I think about entrepreneurship, more so than
mm,
the specific business or anything too concrete. And I think that specifically, there's a lot of different ways to be an entrepreneur. That you can be an entrepreneur by starting a company, but you can also be an entrepreneur by working within a company as an entrepreneur.
mm,
And I think that that's something that I've been increasingly paying attention to. That I think
mm,
that some level of workplace democracy is really important. And then also just being your own boss in other capacities. As an author, as authors, we were entrepreneurs. We were sort of forging our own path in the same regard um, that someone starting a company might be. And the same, I think, is true of artists, influencers, musicians. Every self-employed person is an entrepreneur. And I think that it, there are many ways to be be a leader in your community, practice entrepreneurship, practice an entrepreneurial mindset. And I think it's primarily about innovation in whatever capacity that is, innovation and curiosity. And um, so I think that if you go into it with that in mind, then there is really a lot that you can do with entrepreneurship because it's everything. It allows you to bring together people from all different backgrounds
mm,
and come up with ideas that will allow you to improve something in the world around you is really what that mindset allows you to do. And that might take the form of starting a company, starting a nonprofit. It might take the form of joining a company you really care about. It might take the form of doing some sort of
mm,
freelance work, working for yourself. But whatever it is, I think that the the drive and creativity involved in that is a really powerful tool to direct towards some of the problems that we are facing that we all don't always know what to do about, because that was a big thing that we focused on as we were talking to these entrepreneurs, that they're oftentimes a lot of the things that our generation cares about, from climate change to
mm,
AI to every issue you can imagine, college, social media. We talked about a lot of different issues, and all of them I think are often things that feel overwhelming. And it part of what it means to be an entrepreneur, I think, is firstly to be able to break down those problems into manageable pieces, like I mentioned earlier, and also just to not do it alone, because it really is something that you don't do alone. All of the people we spoke with um, emphasized the importance of a good team,
mm,
emphasized how they like focused on like bringing different people together, all the people that help them along the way. That it really is something that takes a long time and involves a lot of different people coming together to build something,
mm,
and that I think that when you develop the skills needed to do that, you can use that to make a difference that you wouldn't be able to make on your own,
mhm,
because that ability to connect people, to be a leader for people, is is something that can allow you to address problems that no one person can,
mhm.
that feel overwhelming otherwise.
Yeah. This is so good. I'm curious, did you come to this conclusion or new understanding about entrepreneurship after you embarked on this journey? In other words, did this journey, writing a book, talking to people, help you have a different understanding of what it means to be an ethical leader, being a good entrepreneur?
Certainly, I would say that
Mm.
it dramatically changed how we think about entrepreneurship. I know that at the start when we were just like 11 or 12 and
Mm.
first coming up with the idea, we were like, oh, what if we talked to Jeff Bezos? Wouldn't that be cool? And it suffice to say that there was a lot of growth that was involved, and
Love that.
um that was really something that was part of what it was about for us, because at the
Hmm.
same time as we were writing this book to provide this advice for others, we were also learning from the entrepreneurs ourselves, and we
Mm.
were applying that advice at the same time as authors. That I as I was saying before, that there's a close relationship between something like trying to write a book and trying to start a company. That just like um just like so many of the entrepreneurs we talked about the process of finding capital, from like to being able to first start out, finding someone who would put money behind their idea.
Mm.
It was the same with us trying to find an agent, um, and a publisher, and there was the lack of guidance,
Mm.
the like feeling that it's solitary, but realization at the end that it's really anything but, and that there were so many people along the way that were so important to everything that happened.
Mm.
Um, all of those things, so all of the entrepreneurial lessons that we were learning are ones that we put into practice at the same time.
Love that.
And so I think all of that culminated into slowly what the philosophy that we have now about entrepreneurship, which is something more than just, oh, how do you make a lot of money, or how do you like talk to someone famous, or what have you. And I do think that it was more than that at the beginning, that we
Mhm.
were also, if anything, the primary inspiration was simply curiosity, the desire to learn more about entrepreneurship and tell people about it excitedly and so forth. Um, but it really, like, the experience of writing down to business is what really made that something more concrete, and developed our ideas about what entrepreneurship can do. And in the process, we learned a lot about what it means to have an entrepreneurial mindset, and what it means to be writers, what it means to be
Mm.
entrepreneurs.
I love that. Learning outside the classroom is as important as learning inside the classroom, right? I love that. Yeah. I have
Absolutely.
two final questions for you. The very first one is I noticed you are pretty active on LinkedIn. And my observation of lots of young people is that many of them are passive consumers of digital media platforms. And not so many are actually creators. They are using the platform to share a message, but you are in the second group. So I'm curious, what inspired you to be on LinkedIn, and how has putting you there influenced or affected your life, shaped your career, whatever? If there's anything at all, share with us.
So I would say there's a few different pieces. The first one regarding consuming, I've never really been someone who was overly focused on social media. I think that I never really liked it because it felt inauthentic, and
Good for you.
it never really it 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 never captured me in the same way that I think that it does for a lot of people. And I don't think that that's something that we should be like blaming people for. It's a part of our life now, for better or worse. And that was one of the reasons that one of the questions that we actually asked every single person we spoke with in the book was, what do you think about social media? Is it good or
Mm.
bad, or how does it affect the way we live? And that was precisely because it was a question that we were thinking about, because it's become
Mm.
such an omnipresent part of our lives, and we wanted to gain a better perspective of how it could be a good thing, how it could be a bad thing, how we could use it healthily. And and that was sort of what we brought to it when I turned 16 and I was like, "Oh, I'm allowed to start a LinkedIn now," because
Mm,
that was one thing that early on we had to do a lot of, like, if we wanted to cold message someone on LinkedIn, I had to do that through my parents because I wasn't even old enough at that
mm.
time to have a LinkedIn account. So that was an interesting experience. Um but aside from that, I would say that it what we wanted to do, and we've started a couple different platforms. There's also an Instagram for Down to Business,
Oh,
and
wow.
um, we post some of the recordings of different events and so forth on YouTube. Uh, but I would say that what we wanted to do, firstly, was just that it felt like it was the natural thing to do
Mm,
at the time. But we had learned how important networking was, for
mm,
better or worse, in our society. That I have my qualms with that, but the way that society is set up is such that oftentimes who you know can make a very big difference. And
mm.
being able to connect with other people and learn from other people and find others who are working in similar areas that you are and reach out to them is a very, very important resource. And so that is something that we wanted to make use of because we had learned how important that was by this point after so many people telling us how important networking was, how important like connections were to in building a good team was, and all of these different people focused skills were to their success.
Mm.
Um, and and then beyond that, also we wanted to share some of the insights that we had learned with others because that was really why we had written Down to Business in the first place.
Mm.
And so we wanted to take any opportunity that we could to talk to others and act as, I suppose, thought leaders of a sort who could share the experiences that we had with people who might learn something from them. And um, that Instagram might have been more effective. It might be more effective for that than LinkedIn, which is more, which for that it was more about meeting people who might get us opportunities to speak with kids rather than talking to the kids directly. Um, but that was really one of the big reasons that we started building something of a social media platform for Down to Business is that we wanted to have yet another avenue to share what we had learned.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so important. And you guys are doing such incredible work. And it is a disservice if you keep it as a secret. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. And my last question for you is that you're about to finish your high school, close this K-12 education chapter. And if you were to restart the journey and share your learning, maybe even some regrets with new students, high schoolers, what advice would you give them? Is there anything in particular that you would advise them start doing now that you cannot ignored when you were a student?
I would say my biggest piece of advice was don't be afraid to start and don't
Mm,
wait. That I think that as I've talked a little bit about this already, but I think that it's very easy to be intimidated by the scale of a project and put it off and say, "Oh, I'd love to write a book someday. I'd love to start a business someday," and never actually get to it. And certainly, I would say that a lot of people will also start it and not ever end up finishing it or seeing it to the level, the fruition that they first envisioned. But I still think that the process is worth it. That it's worth
mm,
um, trying to write a book, writing a book, trying something entrepreneurial. It can even, oftentimes, it is something smaller than that. It can just be talking to some, like sending an email to someone you admire, talking with a friend about an idea you had. That was how Down to Business started. That it can be doing a lemonade stand or volunteering for an organization you care about, or just anything that sort of gets you into the mindset of
mm,
trying something new, getting outside of your comfort zone, um, being curious innovating, and embracing that it might not go well and learning from that experience is going to allow you to figure out who you are and what you want to do, and is really so important to all of the things that our generation cares about, and to our experiences of growing up, and to our ability to address some of the things that we want to address when we grow up and make the world a better place.
I love it. Thank you. Powerful advice. So, yeah, so share with us. Thank you for your time. Share with us where can people get a copy of your book?
It is available, of course, on Amazon, at Barnes and Noble, anywhere books are found. Really, it's you can find it on various other book websites online. It's in increasingly in libraries in not only Maryland but across the country and across the world. We've a few times seen copies of Down to Business floating around in countries on the other side of the earth, and that has been a
Oh,
very
must be
crazy
a,
experience for us.
yes, nice.
But just keep an eye out and take a look, because we really think that it will give you something to get started with that will hopefully give you some ideas.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I can't wait to get my copies. And so, yes, thank you again for your time. Anyone watching this, and I highly recommend if you want your kid to connect with Finley at a deeper level, we're just talking about networking. And so, I highly recommend you register for the two workshops that I'm hosting, and also check out other summer camps workshops available through Sidwell Summer. There are so many incredible programs. And make sure you get a copy of Finley's book and follow him on LinkedIn and check out their Instagram. I will everything. I'll have everything in the show note. And thank you so much again, Finley, for your time and insight and wisdom.
Thank you.